What's going on, everybody? C4 here, and welcome back to the newest episode of the 32-team 7-round mock draft series. And the team we're doing today is the team we did last night in the retro rebuild. If you haven't checked that out, go do so. It was a pretty fun video. And that is the Oakland Raiders, a team with 3 first-round picks, pick 4, 24, and 27. They also have a second-round pick, which, you know, given the moves that they made this offseason with those first 3-round picks, they're going to be expected to compete right away in that AFC West. I mean, you got in LaMarcus Joyner, you brought in Vontaze Burfict, re-signed Jonathan Hankins. You got Trent Brown, paid a lot of money for Trent Brown, Tyrell Williams, J.J. Nelson at wide receiver, some nice little weapons there, but obviously the biggest one out of all is landing Antonio Brown in a trade with the Pittsburgh Steelers. So we're going to do our best here to try and help the Raiders get into the playoffs their final year before they move to Las Vegas. And I'll tell you right now, Raider fans, this is probably my favorite mock draft out of all the mocks that you're going to see, and I'm glad it comes at number 4 because it's, 3 first-round picks. It's a big part of this series. I think I did pretty well. So, if any... Mike Mack, I know Mike Mack watches my videos, so this goes through them. They draft the way I tell them draft. I got a Patreon page. That's all you guys have to do to thank me. So without further ado, at pick number 4 in the first round, I'm selecting Brian Burns, defensive end from Florida State. I've been higher on Brian Burns than 99% of the scouting mock draft community on YouTube, on just popular websites. It's just one of those things, man. He just has that he has that it factor, much like Josh Allen, the outside linebacker. They just have that it factor that I think is going to be warranted of a top 5 pick. And when you look at Brian Burns, he solves some things too for the Oakland Raiders. He solved the Khalil Mack problem. Everyone's like, oh, we got rid of our franchise player. And all last year they struggled getting pressure after the quarterback. It was almost a meme. Well, a guy like Brian Burns in the 4th round, he should be able to move on that whole fan base past Khalil Mack. It's going to be tough, but I think Brian Burns has that upside. He's an elite athlete at 250 pounds. Weight concerns were his biggest red flag entering this offseason, entering the draft process. And we've seen some players, some prospects add some weight that didn't necessarily help them out. Kyler Murray added some weight, didn't run any 40 drills. Showed off as he would just, pretty much refused to show his athleticism, probably because of the giant weight gain. Ja'Kai Polite, Florida Gator outside linebacker, was regarded as a top 10, top 15 pick, and then bulked up 20-some pounds from his listed weight, 235, 240. He's 260 at the combine. Looked really slow, but Brian Burns had those weight concerns, and he looked better than ever running through these drills. Showed that he is truly an elite athlete. For me, he's easily the second best 4-3 defensive end in this draft after Nick Bosa, and I feel like when I look at the Raiders depth chart right now, he's the top defensive end. He will be the top edge rusher on that roster. Hoping you can still develop Arden Key, who was a 3rd-round pick in 2018. A lot of people's eyes had 1st-round potential, but outside of that, there's not a lot there in terms of edge rushers. Pressure coming off that edge. And I think a guy like Brian Burns comes in, starts day 1, and helps everyone slowly. It's obviously going to be very tough, but slowly to move on from Khalil Mack. Next up, we have pick 24 in the first round. I'm selecting Byron Murphy, cornerback from Washington. Now, a little bit of a slip. I feel like when you look at the teams that are going to be selected in the first round, I don't think cornerback's as big of a need as some of the other positions, obviously with the strength of the defensive line. So I think some corners will slip, but don't get it twisted. Byron Murphy is absolutely a first-round talent. But I think the lack of elite speed, just because, when you see corners go high, they're usually corners that are either have a lot of upside or proven talents, and they run, 4.45 or below. When you look at Byron Murphy, he ran a 4.55 at the combine, so that's a little bit slower than a lot of people like to look for at least top 10, top 15 talents at the cornerback spot. So I think because of that, he will be, maybe slip later into the first round. A great fit for that Oakland Raiders defense. I mean, when you look at the Raiders secondary right now, outside of Garyon Conley, who, when he's consistent, he looks pretty damn good, but, he's still struggling to find that consistency, find that rhythm. There's not a whole lot there at cornerback, and I think you have a very legitimate shot at getting another starter in the first round here, and a guy like Byron Murphy who, some issues about his speed, but everything else from a technical aspect, he is very solid. He's very technically sound, which is kind of status quo with Washington corners. I'm hoping that Sidney Jones can fill in that mold, but we saw that with Marcus Peters as well, that they're able to hit the ground running for the most part, and I think Byron Murphy can start day 1 for the Raiders. So that's a great value there at pick 24. And then finishing up in the first round at pick 27, I'm selecting Noah Fant, tight end from Iowa. He is an exceptional athlete. He absolutely dominated the combine as expected. He is that prototypical, nowadays prototypical he's a glorified wide receiver playing tight end, but he actually is not a liability at blocking. I mean, you have to block if you play at Iowa. He's not a great blocker, but if you're trying to compare him to Evan Ingram, he was a much better blocker than Evan Ingram. Plus, he's a bigger bodied player than Evan Ingram. Evan Ingram is very much more close to that wide receiver playing tight end because Evan Ingram's 230 pounds. You look at Noah Fant, he's closer to 250 than he is to 230. So that is working in his favor. And when you look at the Raiders offense last year, obviously they're going to have a lot of new looks. They got Tyrell Williams and Antonio Brown, but their best weapon, the best weapon Derek Carr utilized was Jared Cook, and he's gone to free agency. I think he's rumored to be signing with the Saints. So there's a big, massive void there at tight end. Again, in the first round, you're getting a guy that is going to be able to contribute and step into the starting role right away. You look at the tight ends right now on the Raiders, not very good. You got like Darren Waller, Lee Smith, like, you know, nothing there. So a guy like Noah Fant instantly is the best tight end on that roster, and that is 3 first-round picks that are all going to be big-time contributors as a rookie. So then moving into the second round at pick 35, I'm selecting Mack Wilson, linebacker from Alabama. Even with the signing of Vontaze Burfict, they need a long-term piece at linebacker. You got Tahir Whitehead, you know, he's starting to get the end of his prime. Obviously, Vontaze Burfict, short-term deal, see what you can get there. Familiarity with the DC, who was DC back in Cincinnati. But I think getting a guy that can actually be that future linebacker, the guy that you can start to build and mold into the leader of your defense, I think you can get that in Mack Wilson. I think he's an excellent cover linebacker, but much more so based upon his instincts and football IQ than it is him being a tremendous athlete, because he is somewhat, I don't want to say he's limited as an athlete, but he's not like, you know, an elite athlete like you saw with Devin Bush or Devin White, the other first-round linebackers that probably have been gone at this point. And, you know, it just adds a dimension that they don't really have right now on that defense. And, you know, I look at how you're going to set up. You put Tahir Whitehead as the Sam, you have Mack Wilson inside and Vontaze Burfict as the Will, and that is a significantly better linebacking core than what the Raiders have had over the last 5 years, and that's in my opinion. As long as obviously Vontaze Burfict can stay on the field. Moving into the 4th round pick, 106, I'm selecting Darrell Henderson, running back from Memphis. Darrell Henderson is an absolute home run hitter at running back. I think he also brings some upside to be a 3-down runner, but I would guess right now as a rookie, he's going to be better suited as a running back by committee type route, and that's kind of what they have on the roster. You have Jalen Richard, who is, you know, in its own right, you probably would have to, if you're ranking like the pure receiving backs in the league, he might be top 10. So you have that dimension there. So now you just need the guy that can be your every down runner. Now, you know, from a run blocking standpoint, a guy that's going to be able to help him in pass pro, you know, obviously you're probably not going to get that in Darrell Henderson, but at least from a home run hitter, give me Darrell Henderson over DeAndre Washington, Chris Warren, or James Butler. I mean, obviously Chris Warren can be maybe your big power back, guy you bring in on clear passing downs to help chip block and stuff like that. But I think when you're looking for a running back, it is a position that the Raiders want to try to address. I think in the 4th round, getting Darrell Henderson, a guy, like I said, that is incredibly explosive, had an insane amount, I think it was like 8.6. I don't know the number in front of me, but I remember it was like 8 point something yards per carry last year. 2,200 yards from scrimmage, 25 touchdowns in his final year as a junior with Memphis. He can catch out of the backfield. He adds explosiveness, and like I said, adds that dimension to this running back by committee that they currently don't have. Hell, they might even still like look to extend maybe Doug Martin and bring him back, depending on what, you know, what's going on with Marshawn Lynch. But I think Darrell Henderson in the 4th round, what he's going to be able to bring to this offense, that is really nice value piece and pickup for the Raiders. Going into the 5th round, pick 140, I was selecting Stanley Morgan Jr., wide receiver from Nebraska. I think he's an underrated wide receiver that's not getting nearly enough hype this season as he should be. He had a really, really good combine, was a lot faster than people expected at a 4.53, which is not a burner time, but that's definitely not a bad time at all. I think would be above average if you're like kind of ranking all the starting wide receivers. And just obviously, you know, it's lazy scouting, but no one, for the fact that no one really knows Stanley, just go watch like a highlight of him on YouTube. He is that wow catchability that a lot of people don't have. I think he's as complete of a wide receiver as you're going to get in day 3. He's a, you know, technically sound route runner. You can pretty much do everything you want. He's maybe more so suited inside the slot, but you know, I think he brings a lot of versatility. And when you look at the back end of this Raiders wide receiver depth chart, there's just a lot of guys. Like you got Dwayne Harris, gimmicky, you know, Rashard Davis, you got Seth Roberts. I know a lot of Raider fans don't like Seth Roberts because it was just pretty much the guy Derek Carr would check down to a lot last year. But there's just a lot of wide receivers that are kind of nobodies that I don't think necessarily have a whole lot of upside. And getting a guy like Stanley Morgan, adding another talented wide receiver to that room, more so at the top end. When you're looking at AB, Tyrell Williams, and then you to a lesser extent, you get J.J. Nelson and Marcel Aitman and Seth Roberts. I think there's some pretty good value to be said there. And again, if you're trying to see and decide if Derek Carr is going to be your franchise starter, this is it. This is the year. This is where we're going to put all these weapons, as much weapons and as much resources as we can to help build this offense to see if Carr is going to be our franchise starter. Get him a nice little youngin, a nice little tenderoni piece in Stanley Morgan Jr. and see if he can develop and get some chemistry with Derek Carr for the future of the Raiders offense. And then moving into the 7th round, they have 2 7th-round picks. First up at 218, we got to get a Gruden grinder. There's no way we can go through a whole draft and not get a Gruden grinder. And what we're going to do is have them draft Gardner Minshew, quarterback from Washington State. I think he's like the most Gruden grinder pick maybe in this entire draft. When you look at the backups right now, behind Derek Carr, because there is some uncertainty about Derek Carr, you have Nathan Peterman. Clearly for the memes, you don't want that to be the only quarterback on the roster. But I think a guy like Gardner Minshew, he's an interesting quarterback. I think right now, personally, I would grade him as a high-level backup that could potentially develop into something more. You got to figure last year it was Washington State. Obviously, they are a gimmicky air raid offense under Mr. Mike Leach. But 4,800 passing yards, 38 touchdowns to 9 picks. Like, he has the production. Like, you look at his final year, kind of similar to what Derek Carr's final year was at Fresno State. Obviously, very different type of players. Derek Carr is one of the most underrated athletes at the quarterback spot, even though he really hasn't. I feel like, personally, I'm not a huge Raider fan. After he broke his leg, it seems like he's been less willing to run and show off that athleticism. I don't know. Maybe that's just me from the couple games that I have watched the Raiders play. But I think a guy like Gardner Minshew, because he is that Gruden grinder, because he is much better, I think, and has a lot more upside than Nathan Peterman to be the top backup behind Derek Carr. It's not that much of a risk to draft a quarterback here at the end of the draft in the 7th round. Then finishing up, and the 7th round pick, 235, I'm selecting Ricky Walker, defensive tackle from Virginia Tech. I've done actually a lot of scouting on Ricky Walker because I've had him going to the Eagles in a couple mock drafts. But, obviously when I did the 7th round, he was available here to the Raiders. I just kind of view him as a good value rotational defensive tackle, a cheaper option than I say. You look at like Justin Ellis. I mean, he's $4.5 million savings next year. Gabe Wright savings, Eddie Vanderdoss not really panning out. You got PJ Hall, Hurst, and Hankins. I mean, that's a pretty decent interior, but just continue to add more depth. It's hard for me to look at all these other rosters and not try to model it after Philly, because what Philly has done for the most part has worked, and Philly has insane depth along the defensive line. So just getting the best defensive line players available, especially when this year is absolutely stacked, and the guys that you're going to be able to get in the defensive line position in round 6 and 7 are guys that other years, because of, maybe there's not nearly as much depth, that could be 4th and 5th round picks. I think that could be the case here for Ricky Walker. And like I said, just kind of, getting a guy in a 7th round deal that has a legitimate shot to make the final 53 as a cheaper contract. Because obviously with the money they're throwing around, gotta have to start thinking about where the savings are to come in the future years. I'm just looking at ugly contracts, and Justin Ellis definitely has one of those. So there you go, guys. That is my 7th round mock draft for the Raiders. Definitely Raider fans want to hear what you guys feel about this one in the comment section below. As always, if it's your first time stopping by, don't be afraid to hit that subscribe button, smash the like button if you enjoyed. And until next time, it's C4 saying peace out.